Something unprecedented is happening across Africa, but some of you are not even aware. It's already clear that President Traore of Burkina Faso is a remarkable leader. Since he became president of Burkina Faso, he has stolen the hearts of every African both within and outside the continent with his patriotic stance. His leadership styles and numerous actions have given ordinary Africans hope of a brighter future for the continent. This is why a petition has recently been signed by a group of Africans to make Traore the President of Africa. Since it was launched, the petition has been gaining momentum with more people jumping on board. But is it truly possible for Traore to be the President of Africa? Let's find out. The first time a petition was launched in support of President Traore was in October last year. It was in support of Traore's vision for Burkina Faso and his vision for a united and decolonized Africa. The petition reads, "We, the undersigned, represent a global community of Africans and the African diaspora, all deeply committed to the realization of a decolonized, united, and self-sufficient Africa. At this crucial moment in our shared history, we are inspired by the leadership of President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, whose bold vision and unwavering dedication have reignited hope for the future of not only Burkina Faso, but the entire African continent and its people across the globe." For centuries, Africa and its diaspora have been subjected to the harmful legacies of colonization, exploitation, and imperialism. These external forces have not only fractured our lands and resources, but have also disrupted the cultural, political, and economic autonomy of African nations. Even after formal independence, the grip of neo-colonial powers and global imperialist systems continues to influence the political and economic realities of many African countries, with rippling effects on Africans living abroad. In this ongoing struggle, Burkina Faso has emerged as a beacon of hope under the leadership of President Ibrahim Traore. His efforts to challenge the remnants of imperialism, advocate for the sovereignty of Burkina Faso, and foster unity across the African continent represent a bold step toward dismantling these oppressive systems. His work aligns with the broader Pan-African vision of leaders like Thomas Sankara, Kwame Nkrumah, and Patrice Lumumba, who all fought for a united Africa free from foreign interference and a global African community strengthened by solidarity. We stand with President Traore because we recognize that his fight is our fight. The battle for freedom from neo-colonial influence in Burkina Faso is emblematic of the broader African and diaspora struggle for true liberation and self-determination. His leadership has set a powerful example of courage and resistance, not just for the people of Burkina Faso, but for Africans and people of African descent around the world. We, the undersigned, wish to express our deepest solidarity with President Ibrahim Traore. We pledge our unwavering support for his efforts to build a Burkina Faso, and by extension, an Africa that is free from neo-colonial control, economically independent, and united in purpose. In signing this petition, we call upon all Africans, people of African descent, and allies of African liberation across the world to support the leadership of Ibrahim Traore, resist neo-colonialism and imperialism, and build Pan-African solidarity and diaspora unity. Before we proceed, here is a reminder to like this video, drop a comment, and subscribe to our channel so that you can get more videos like this. This is remarkable, but right now the petition has moved from just supporting President Traore in Burkina Faso to supporting making him the President of Africa. The petition description reads, "The existing divided leadership in Africa has led to disparities in growth, development, and inequality across the continent. This petition aims to dissolve the colonial borders and bring together the diverse nations of Africa under a collective leadership for a more united, robust Africa." We propose Ibrahim Traore, the current president of Burkina Faso, to be the united president of Africa. With a solid track record, his leadership will ensure equitable development, a single currency, and a unified national flag representing all African nations. Out of 10,731 people that signed the proceedings petition, about 1,400 support a borderless Africa led by one leader. Now is the time to heighten our efforts, unity, and strength, and together we can build a stronger Africa. Did you hear that? Africans are now pushing for the notion of one Africa, one government, and one currency. The idea of one Africa is not new. Pan-African leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Muammar Gaddafi, and Thomas Sankara previously advocated for a United States of Africa. Gaddafi was even ready to launch a single Pan-African currency based on the Libyan gold dinar with 143 tons of gold accumulated over the years. But he was unfortunately killed by the administration of US President Obama and Hillary Clinton. Since then, the idea of a single Africa has been discarded. What we have heard over the years is countless talks about African unity, sponsored by the African Union, which currently has no backbone. But now the idea has been revived, and it's been revived by ordinary Africans desperate for a change. Since its release, the petition had it gain momentum across social media platforms. Hashtags like Traore for Africa and African Unity have trended on Twitter, TikTok, and Facebook, attracting millions of supporters. The digital movement reflects growing Pan-African sentiments and a desire for systemic change. But what have been the reactions to the petition? The petition has received mixed reactions from political analysts, African leaders, and the general public. For those that support the petition, they argue that the current leadership across Africa has failed to address key issues such as poverty, corruption, and foreign exploitation. Critics, however, believe that a single African leader is an impractical and unrealistic vision, citing the African Union's inefficacy in implementing such a political shift. The most interesting reaction, however, is from governments across Africa which have largely ignored the petition, as many view Traore's leadership as a challenge to the status quo. These corrupt leaders certainly would not want the idea of a single Africa because it would mean that they would lose access to the power and influence they have accumulated in their countries. It's the exact same thing that happened to Muammar Gaddafi. It is well known that it was members of the African Union that called on NATO to intervene in Libya, which led to the death of Gaddafi. So, is the idea of a single Africa feasible with President Traore as the leader? In our opinion, it is not. While the idea is a remarkable one, there are so many challenges and obstacles for this to happen. One of these challenges is the fact that Africa consists of 54 sovereign nations with distinct political systems, ideologies, languages, and interests. Unifying them under a single presidency would require extensive constitutional and diplomatic restructuring. Each of these 54 sovereign countries, in turn, have different tribes with their own ideologies and culture. In fact, it can rightly be said that grouping these tribes to form a country is the cause of civil wars across the continent. Take, for instance, Nigeria. Nigeria has over 750 tribes, but since independence, only 2 tribes have been in charge of the leadership of the country. This was the major cause of the Nigerian Civil War of 1967 to 1970, when the Republic of Biafra, made up of the Igbo tribes, decided to form an independent state. What about Mali? The current insecurity in Mali, which has spread across the Sahel and has been hijacked by Islamist insurgents, started with some members of the Tuareg tribes demanding for an independent state. The same can also be said of Rwanda and the DRC. So, if after 60 years of independence, African countries have not been able to unite the numerous tribes that make up their countries, how possible is it for all African countries to come together as one? Beyond this, let's talk about so-called African blocs, which supposedly are to be symbols of a united Africa. These blocs, like the African Union, have failed to achieve peace and unity across the continent. There are numerous reasons for this, but one of the prominent ones is the fact that the African Union is not independent. The African Union, formerly called the Organization of African Unity, was founded in May 1963. It wasn't until 2002 that the name changed to the African Union under the leadership of Muammar Gaddafi. The OAU, as it was called at the time, was a symbol of the liberation of African peoples and their hope for a happy future. The main message was putting an end to foreign interference, and the only way to make that happen was a unified Africa with a strong voice on the international stage. So, the African Union was designed to help safeguard peace and stability on the continent. However, it's been more than 60 years and almost everyone can agree that the AU has failed in its objective. There is no peace and neither is there stability in the continent. Several African countries such as Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Sudan, the DRC and the CAR, are battling with severe insecurity crises. The economic development of the continent has stalled, and some may even say declined. Millions of African youths are leaving the continent in search of greener pastures in Europe through dangerous routes. In simple terms, things have gotten bad. Yet, the African Union is still in existence. What has it been doing? According to some African analysts, the African Union is an organization that primarily represents the interests of the powerful. It is toothless and ineffective, and it repeatedly proves itself incapable of ensuring prosperity, security, and peace for all Africans. The situations in the Sahel region, Sudan, and Tigray reflect how ineffective the AU has been. There are armed conflicts in about 20 countries in Africa, yet the African Union seems not to feel responsible. It seems the only thing the African Union does is to attend a series of meetings that yield no result. The situation is frankly pathetic. How can such an organization achieve African unity? To make matters worse, the African Union is not financially independent, but dependent on Western funding. How can an organization that was formed to put an end to Western interference in Africa depend on the West for funding? According to reports, over 75% of the AU's financing comes from external partners, particularly the European Union and individual European countries like France. Can you see the problem? This is the reason why the continent is not making progress and why the African Union has not been able to achieve much. If Europe is still funding the African Union, how can the African Union make decisions that will benefit the continent? We all know that Europe and the West do not want the progress of Africa because it would mean that they would no longer have access to cheap resources. This means that the African Union can only make decisions that will protect the interests of Europe and the West. So, under this situation, can Africa achieve a unified Africa? Besides this, African leaders have been talking about free movement over the years, but do you know that it's much harder for an African to travel across Africa than an American? It is quite pathetic that African countries prefer to open their borders to foreigners rather than fellow Africans. Although some countries like Kenya and Rwanda have begun to change this narrative, there is still a lot that needs to be done. If there is to be one Africa, African leaders will have to drop their pride in quest for power and wealth and work together to achieve it. However, if there is any leader that deserves to be the President of the United States of Africa, it is indeed President Traore of Burkina Faso. Just look at what he has achieved in Burkina Faso in less than 3 years since he became president of the country. If you compare it to a country like Nigeria, which has even bigger resources and is not battling with as much insecurity as Burkina Faso, you would know that Traore has done remarkably well. Traore deserves the position of the President of Africa for several reasons. 1. Traore has a strong anti-colonial stance. In our opinion, this is one of the most important traits that the President of Africa must possess. Majority of African leaders today are weak. While some of them have publicly denounced neo-colonialism, the fact is that they are all talks. They have not done anything to change the situation. But President Traore has proven that he is not all talk. He is a man that says and does what he says. Right from the start, Traore denounced Western imperialism and neo-colonialism, but he didn't just denounce it, he made it a reality. For decades, France continued to control Burkina Faso and the Sahel. But Traore changed everything. Not only did he kick out French troops, but he also ended things with the West, preferring to deal with non-Western countries. Western media has painted Traore in a negative light, calling him a dictator and suppressor of free speech. But Traore has remained resolute and focused. Secondly, President Traore is patriotic and ambitious. One of the problems of African leaders is that they are content with the status quo. They are content with the current development of Africa, even if they may say otherwise. They are content with the poverty, high debt, and the negative image of African countries. Do you know why? It's because they, like the West, profit from this corrupt system. While the West has access to African resources, these greedy African leaders have access to wealth and power. And as long as they have that, they do not care about building their countries. This is a very pathetic situation. But President Traore is not like that. Traore is ambitious and patriotic. He loves his country and his people. This is why he has dedicated and committed his time towards developing his country. One of Traore's dreams is to industrialize Burkina Faso. As such, since he became leader, he has launched several industries, one of which is the tomato factory. The tomato processing facility, worth $8.1 million, is located in Bobo Dioulasso. The tomato processing factory is a major stride towards promoting food security and economic sustainability in Burkina Faso. According to the Information Agency of Burkina Faso, the factory was constructed in just 462 days at the cost of 7.5 billion CFA franc. Interestingly, the tomato facility is just one of many projects spearheaded by APEC. APEC was established in February 2023 by President Traore to harness local resources for national development, and since then, it has been doing a remarkable job. During the inauguration ceremony of the tomato facility, President Traore announced that there are plans to open a similar facility in Yako in the north in the coming months. There are also plans to open a similar facility in the East Center region of Burkina Faso. All these projects align with Traore's broader vision of economic resilience and sustainability in Burkina Faso. But it's not just agriculture. Under the leadership of Traore, Burkina Faso is on a path toward developing and revolutionizing its textile industry in a way that promotes cultural pride. In a speech, President Traore announced a new initiative to ditch Western attires and adopt locally made fabrics for school uniforms. But that's not all. He also halted the import of police and military uniforms from the West and declared the use of the Burkinabe locally made fabric for military and police uniforms. Traore also implemented a policy that required all magistrates and clerks to wear faso d'Anfani, a traditional woven fabric made from local cotton during official court hearings. This is not just revolutionary, but also magnificent. However, Traore didn't just come up with this initiative on his own. No, he took it from the ideals and vision of Thomas Sankara, the iconic and revolutionary Burkinabe leader. As you know, Thomas Sankara was known for his principles and ideals of self-reliance and independence. During his address to the United Nations in 1984, Sankara said, "We must succeed in producing more, because it is natural that he who feeds you also imposes his will. We are free. He who does not feed you can demand nothing of you." This is why he shunned loans from the World Bank and IMF, and he pushed for food self-sufficiency and textile production. In a very passionate speech delivered some months before his assassination, Sankara highlighted the vision that Traore is now implementing and bringing to life. During the powerful speech, Sankara proudly wore one of the Burkinabe locally made fabrics as a symbol of his vision for the Burkinabe textile industry. In his speech, Traore lamented how imported Western fabrics have overshadowed Burkina Faso's rich textile heritage. Then he proceeded to highlight why every Burkinabe citizen should ditch imported fabrics and embrace the locally made fabrics. For Sankara, the adoption of locally made textiles was not just a matter of fashion or economics, but a revolutionary act that could transform the country's textile industry completely. Unfortunately, Sankara could not achieve that vision because he was assassinated. But, like Sankara said before his death, 1,000 Sankaras would be born. And Traore is one of those Sankaras who have decided to take Sankara's vision and make it a reality. Traore's decision to mandate the use of traditional, locally produced fabrics for school uniforms and military and police uniforms is a significant milestone and a concrete step toward achieving Sankara's dream. But this policy goes far beyond celebrating Burkina Faso's culture and embracing the country's cultural identity. It is also about creating a substantial and consistent demand for local textiles. To support the initiative, Traore launched a local textile factory in Burkina Faso, which will meet the uniform needs of the citizens. This facility is, however, more than just a production center. It is actually a symbol of Traore's commitment to self-sufficiency and economic empowerment. The factory is expected to create jobs, foster skill development, and serve as a catalyst for further industrial growth in the textile sector. These factories and many others have Traore established in such a short space of time. Imagine if all this was happening in all African countries. There is no doubt that the continent would grow and develop at a faster rate. What are your thoughts? Let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video Drop a comment and share this video.